We're in an interesting place for sure. I'd like to observe that this has been coming for a long time. So AI has been around for 30, 40, 50 years, depending on how you count it. And the progress looked very slow at the beginning, like any exponential process, right? The proverbial chessboard, put 1 grain of rice on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, 8 on the fourth. It doesn't look like much for the first 32 squares, but then you get to the second half of the chessboard and it starts to explode in capability. And what's really happened now is we are on the second half of the chessboard. So everything you're seeing now, get ready for some even wilder stuff in the months ahead.
I think it's easier to figure out the losers when it comes to this kind of technology evolution, but perhaps a little harder to figure out who would be the winners, but that's actually your job. So how do you figure out when AI can write code and replace a lot of subscription services that we actually see in the public market, this major software correction right now? How do you do your job and pick out the winners with a longer-term investment horizon?
So the investment horizon and the lens is really important, as you say. There has been some talk about the death of software. That talk, to my mind, is wildly overblown. But it would be accurate to say it's the death of making software as we used to make software, by typing lines of code. What AI has done is it's made the typing of lines of code go really, really fast, hundreds of times faster than any human being. It just emanates code, and it looks like magic, and it seems like a superpower. However, here's the thing that has become suddenly even more important and more valuable. The judgment. Is this the right code? Is this code doing what we want it to do? Is it aligned with our interests? Can we trust it? Have we verified it? All of those problems are really hard, and so the work of software engineers and of software companies is changing in a radical way, not to typing code, but to verifying it. And software companies that evolve rapidly to become that trusted layer, that audited layer of governance and management of software, those companies are going to thrive. Companies that want to keep selling seats and selling tools for humans to use, I think that's going to be a rough play.
What do you make of this software versus hardware story? I know that, again, this is really the public market story, but there is really this sovereign, perhaps hoarding kind of behavior that major companies and countries, powerful countries, they can actually afford to sort of secure some of the critical minerals as well as the memory chips. Is that part of your calculation as well when you look at your portfolio companies or look at some candidates?
Well, years ago, I remember when I first became Chief Information Officer of Goldman Sachs. That was a very different job for me. I had been part of the quant organization, the analytics organization, and so the CEO of Goldman Sachs gave to me an incredible mentor who was the CEO of Google at the time, Eric Schmidt. And he comes to my office, and the first thing he says to me was, "Have you seen your data centers?" And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Oh no, another software guy." And he said, you gotta go see your data centers. And so I went to see the data centers, and I have never been the same. He wanted me to understand the physicality of computation. Google had to understand that way earlier in its journey, but for me, I could still get away with being a software guy. I went and saw those vast cavernous rooms with power generators and chillers and machines with blinking lights gathering cobwebs, and it was a profound experience, right? And so the physicality of computation, that infrastructure, this new layer of above energy and above communications, but of compute. Right now, you need a lot of infrastructure to deliver that. You need that infrastructure all over the world. Sovereigns have interest in having that infrastructure under their jurisdiction. So it's a profound capital intensive, complicated global theme, and that's the kind of theme at Sixth Street that we love to work on.
So Marty, listen, now that you're a convert to the hardware side in data centers, right, I want to try and tie that into what you do, right, in private markets. Obviously, the Mag 7 have been reporting. The CapEx is still ramping, although we're starting to see a little bit of bifurcation. Microsoft didn't do so well, right? That was mostly on Azure. Are you concerned that we're looking at a situation where there's maybe overcapacity, overbuilding of data centers? How constrained are we by the grid and power, right? And the third part, which ties into what you do in private markets, is, you know, these hyperscalers, they are probably almost up to here, right, in terms of funding their CapEx from free cash flow, up to about an average of 70%. Now they're starting to turn to debt, including private markets. Is this something we should worry about? Because, you know, a simple sort of observation is private markets are pretty darn opaque, and that makes them scary.
Well, so let me unpack some of those questions. So no, the question, is this a bubble? That is in the air for sure. Yeah. Nobody's really able to say when a bubble starts and when a bubble ends, right? It'd be wonderful if you could actually predict that. Yeah. From what I see, having been in computer science since I was a kid, is the amount of compute. We are compute constrained by every measure that we can see. There just aren't enough computers.
But the good news is, right, and we compare to China, we dominate in compute, at least we still do now, right?
And, well, so I like to not see it as domination and as a race. I think different countries have different things that they're bringing to the table. Okay. But we need way more compute than we've actually got. And you touched on a really important theme. What is going to constrain this exponential growth that I referred to at the outset? There's that adage, trees don't grow to the sky. Yeah. And if I had to predict what is the rate limiting factor right now, it is energy. And the grid, this is an area where China has been building incredibly thoughtfully and building a huge grid, and it's not clear that it's becoming clear that you can't just build a data center and hope you can plug it into the grid. The grid in the US might not be there for you, and so you're starting to see companies make very interesting moves where they're buying power plants and they're entering into long-term contracts for SMRs, right? So the modular reactors. There's a huge amount of work on fusion, and something that as a kid I thought of as science fiction. You know the Dyson sphere? So like an advanced civilization, you might be able to tell it because it would have built a shell around its sun to capture all the photons and turn them into compute, but it would still have a gravitational signature, just no light. Right? Well, we're talking about data centers in space, and that's gone from being sci-fi and having some very hard problems, right? How do you shield from radiation? How do you dissipate the heat? It sounds great to be in a vacuum, but there's nothing to dissipate the heat to. So these are all hard problems.